This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
This podcast contains adult themes and language, and some of the things that we discuss may be disturbing to some listeners. In this podcast, we discuss sexual assault, torture, race, and murder. Listener discretion is advised. Please take care of yourself.
Let's get into the early life of Daniel Oliver Jones. Hit it, Beth.
Daniel Oliver Jones was born on September 26, 1969. He grew up in the Kansas City, Missouri area near Raytown, east of Troost Avenue.
In high school, Daniel was frequently in trouble for disruptive behavior, excessive tardiness, and roaming the halls without passes. And that's
pretty much all we know.
On his early life.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, there was a lot of speculation about his childhood, but I didn't see it in enough places to feel confident. That we should go with it. So now let's get into the timeline. What do you got for us, Beth?
May 20th, 1987 was the last day of classes before summer vacation at Raytown South High School, where Jones was a senior. At about 10:30 a.m., a female teacher entered a classroom to prepare for a class. She rearranged the desks, and because the room didn't have any windows, she opened some double doors which led into an auditorium.
As she opened the doors, a man reached in and grabbed her wrist, yanked her into the school auditorium, shoved her onto the floor, and started choking her.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. As she struggled, she looked at his face and saw that the attacker was a student. She didn't know him very well, though. The teenager raped her and then ran away when the 10:47 a.m. bell rang.
That's horrifying.
Yeah.
Students who were switching classes later told police that they saw the teacher standing in the hallway in a ripped blue dress, screaming hysterically that she'd been raped. At about the same time, other witnesses told police they saw Jones running out of the auditorium.
The victim gave a description of the man who raped her to the police officers. One of the officers gave her a school yearbook to determine if she could identify anyone. From this book, she identified Jones. Jones was arrested, placed in a lineup, and the victim identified Jones from a videotape of that lineup.
According to court records, when police questioned Jones 2 days later, he told them he'd been hanging out with 4 other guys in the locker room at the time of the rape. When they told him they planned to question those boys, he said that actually he'd been sitting outside on a grassy hill reading a textbook.
What?
Minding his own beeswax.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. When police reminded him that students had already turned in their textbooks the day before the rape, he said he had been outside sleeping. Oh, no.
Right,
I wasn't reading.
Right. I was sleeping.
And then he changed his story again, claiming that he had been sleeping on the steps leading from the stage to the auditorium when he'd been awakened by a scream, and immediately ran from the auditorium because he was afraid he would get into trouble because he was not supposed to be in the auditorium at that time.
So there was a trial, and Jones testified at his trial, admitting that he had told the police 5 or 6 different versions of what he had been doing just prior to and during the time the rape took place. And forensics experts found a hair on the teacher and testified that it matched a hair from Jones.
Now, today we know that that is junk science, but in the 80s...
I don't think they said it was an exact match, or maybe they did, but I mean, you can look at 2 hairs and say they're similar.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's strong enough evidence to convict. But in this case, there is witnesses, there is his changing story, there is the witness who identified him in a lineup, and the hair, right? So all those things, I don't have any criticisms of that. It's just the hair is not the linchpin in any case in 2024. It shouldn't be anyway.
Gotcha.
So in March 1988, a jury convicted Jones of felony forcible rape, and a judge sentenced him to 10 years in prison. In 1989, he attempted to appeal his sentence by claiming that prosecutors should have been prohibited from using his inappropriate school behavior as evidence, but the appeal was rejected.
While in prison, he did not receive any psychological treatment, and rehabilitation during his incarceration is questionable. In 1996, Jones was released on parole after serving 8 years and registered as a level 3 sex offender.
2 years later, on December 2nd, 1998, 19-year-old Janai Douglas was stabbed to death in the bedroom of her apartment. Her body was discovered by a roommate around 7:30 p.m.
The Jones family had lived across the street from the Douglas family for years. The families went to the same church. As a kid, Daniel Jones had mowed the Douglases' lawn. Janai, who was almost 10 years younger than Jones, often played with his little sister, Melissa. The girls were close friends by the time they started attending Raytown South High School.
After Janai's murder, her mother, Kim Douglas, had seen Jones every now and then when he'd come back to visit his parents or help them with home repairs. Whenever Douglas saw Jones outside doing yard work, he smiled and he waved and sometimes stopped to chat. What a sick fuck.
Yeah.
She said, quote, "It was always, 'Hi, how are you doing?' Real friendly," unquote.
These guys.
Yeah.
The ones that come back to the victims' families and are nice to them, or the one that attended the barbecue.
Yeah. Disgusting.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still getting around to that fix on your car? You got this. On eBay, you'll find millions of parts, guaranteed to fit. Doesn't matter if it's a major engine repair or your first time swapping your windshield wipers. eBay has that part you need, ready to click perfectly into place. For changes big and small. Loud or quiet. Find all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. But you already know that. eBay. Things, people, love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Commercial Insurance. Business owners, meet Progressive Insurance. They make it easy to get discounts on commercial auto insurance and find coverages to grow with your business. Quote in as little as 6 minutes at progressivecommercial.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company. Coverage provided and serviced by affiliated and third-party insurers. Discounts and coverage selections not available in all states or situations.
On March 10th, 1999, the body of Kaliqua Gilliam, 21, was found by her cousin, lying dead in her duplex. Kaliqua had been stabbed a total of 36 times.
Kaliqua was scheduled to testify against 2 men in an armed robbery case in which she had allegedly been the getaway driver. Police may have believed that she was targeted because she was a witness.
A few months later, on August 16th, Roxanne Colley, 21, was murdered in her apartment. Roxanne had some family in Kansas City, including an aunt and uncle who had raised her after her own mother died at an early age. She was working as a legal secretary for the Internal Revenue Service and had plans to attend Rockhurst University and eventually law school.
When no one had heard from Roxanne for 3 days, a friend went to her home to check on her. The friend walked around outside the house and saw that someone had broken out a back window.
Roxanne's body was inside. She'd been raped and beaten, and her throat had been slashed. During the autopsy, semen was recovered from Roxanne's body. The evidence was swabbed and turned over to investigators. Now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah, here we go. Yep. I hear a DNA coming on. So the Kansas City Crime Lab had a backlog of DNA waiting to be tested and only enough funds to pay 2 DNA experts.
Wow.
Yeah. It took nearly a year and a half for experts at the lab to create a DNA profile from the evidence collected from the body of Roxanne Colley.
Before the perpetrator could be identified, on March 6, 2001, Candrea White, 18, was murdered. Kendria was a single mother of 2 children and a student at Penn Valley Community College.
According to her mother, Stephanie, Kendria was focused and she knew what she wanted. The young woman had recently moved with her 2 children to the Linden Hill apartment complex, and her plan was to transfer to the University of Missouri, Kansas City after 2 years to finish her degree.
That's remarkable. She's 18 years old. She's a single mother, and she had all these plans, and she seemed like really driven.
Driven to not be a statistic. I know women like Kendria, and I just admire
very much
the tenacity and relentless. I'm doing this.
Yep. Kendria and her mother were very close, and they often spoke on the phone. Kendria told her mother that Jones was stalking her. Stephanie thought that stalking was just something that white folks do and paid it no mind.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. The article that I read, she had talked about how she, saw stories about stalking on TV, and it was always white people.
Right.
So you don't hear stories of your own people.
Right.
You don't know.
You don't know that it's a thing, right? Imagine people's surprise when we say serial killers of color.
Yeah.
What? Yes.
And that's why it's important to tell all these stories.
I could not agree more. Yeah, I did not pick up on that fact that she reported that he was stalking her and her.
Yeah. And I also want to mention that in the Wikipedia article, because I always look at Wikipedia.
Yeah, it's the first
like
spot.
A starting point.
Yeah.
They said that he dated some of these women. I don't think he dated any of these women.
No.
I think that's something that he claimed later. Yeah. I wish it was not in the Wikipedia article.
Yeah, maybe we should do something about that.
Yeah, maybe we should.
Yeah.
Who do we write to?
Who's in charge here?
So back to the story. Okay. Stephanie thought that stalking was just something that white folks do.
And paid it no mind. So she suggested that Kendria block Jones's phone number. Kendria said that she did, but he kept calling her from different numbers. And one night, he just showed up at her house in the middle of the night, and she had to tell him to leave. That's really scary.
Terrifying.
And her kids are there.
Her kids, yeah. Then on the afternoon of March 6, 2001, Kendria's neighbor noticed that Kendria's door was halfway open and that her 3-year-old daughter, Raquel, was standing in the hallway of the apartment just inside the front door. The neighbor asked Raquel where her mother was, and Raquel told her that her mother was dead.
The neighbor called the police. Inside the apartment, the investigators found Kendria's body lying in a pool of blood, clad only in a bloody-stained white t-shirt and socks. Kendria had been stabbed 14 times and beaten so badly that she was nearly unrecognizable.
Evidence suggested that her killer had chased her from room to room and cut her repeatedly before she fell and bled to death. Her throat had also been cut, and her children had witnessed her murder.
Speaking to people who had seen her that day, police determined that Kendria had been murdered sometime between 12:30 p.m. and 4:17 p.m. During their investigation, the police discovered a bloody handprint on the wall of Kendria's living room.
In the middle of the fucking day.
In the middle of the day with her children home.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So let's get into the investigation and the arrest. What, Beth?
2 days after her murder, police learned that the bloody handprint matched a fingerprint card that Daniel Oliver Jones had signed in 1998. That day, police arrested Jones at his home.
So it must have been when he was released and registered as a level 3 sex offender.
Yeah.
Jones told lead detective Doug Niemeyer that he had never even heard of Kendria White. Niemeyer asked Jones if he'd ever been inside an apartment in the Linden Hill complex. "Never in my life," Jones replied. He told police that they nabbed the wrong guy.
Jones then proceeded to tell police exactly what he had done on the day of his arrest, from the time he got out of bed in the morning until he was taken into police custody. But when the cops asked him to recount his actions from the previous day, the day after the murder, Jones abruptly ended the questioning, saying, quote, "It's none of your business where I was at," unquote.
Wait a minute. You can't just be like, we're questioning you for a murder investigation. None of your beeswax. What?
That's crazy.
So Jones was charged with the murder of Kendria White. Then in July of 2001, the DNA evidence collected from Roxanne Coley's body was matched to Jones, and he was also charged with her murder. Police also suspected him in the murders of Janai Douglas and Kaliqua Gilliam. So that's it for the investigation, and now we're going to talk about the trial. What do you got, Beth?
A little more than a year after the murder of Kendria White in August of 2002, Jones went on trial for her murder.
Although Kendria's children had witnessed her murder, her son was an infant, and her 3-year-old daughter, Raquel, gave conflicting accounts. The trial court concluded that she was incompetent based on her age and her responses to questions during a hearing. I will say I'm glad that they did not make her testify.
Yeah,
that would have been more traumatic, I think.
Yeah, and the article I was reading about it, or maybe it was the court records. Yeah, I think it was court records. Anyway, she didn't understand what had happened.
Right.
She was 3, so how could she?
Right.
"3 a.m., the comedy horror podcast that holds weekly gatherings around the campfire. Let me tell you what you're going to get. You're going to hear stories about demonic possessions, prison stabbings, skinwalkers, glitches in the Matrix, cult leaders, missing 411, night marchers, Operation Paperclip, Mesopotamian devil worship, and so many monsters it'll give Kanye West a runaway for his money. Pop and meme culture also aren't off topic. A camp where laughs and scares are constantly competing for first place. We're just a group of friends, trying to bust each other's balls, find the best stories, and expand the circle in the process. 3 a.m., the comedy horror podcast not for the faint or fragile of heart. Let's go."
Jones did not testify at his trial, but he did present the testimony of 2 alibi witnesses, his half-sister Tiffany Hill and his half-sister's cousin Antoine Johnson. Antoine Johnson testified that he saw Jones around 2 p.m. on the day of Kendria's murder for about an hour and 45 minutes.
Tiffany Hill testified that Jones was at her home from 12:15 p.m. until about 4 p.m. that day, although she later admitted that she was not home the entire time and that she did not know what James was doing while she was in her bedroom.
So, worthless.
Right.
The key witness, though, was Kathleen Henches, a fingerprint identification expert with the Kansas City Regional Crime Lab, who testified that the bloody handprint found on the wall of Kendria's apartment belonged to Jones, saying, quote, "No one else could possibly have left that print," unquote. Got him!
Got him, yeah. That's convincing for a jury, for sure.
Yeah.
So in August of 2002, after less than an hour of deliberation, Jones was convicted of the murder of 18-year-old Kendria White. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole.
Although the state had DNA evidence in Roxanne Coley's murder, Jones claimed that he and Roxanne had been in a sexual relationship, and I think this is why he claimed that.
Okay.
And the cases against him for the murders of Janai Douglas and Kaliqua Gilliam were considerably weaker. They didn't have DNA evidence in those cases, I don't think.
Okay. And on March 19th, 2004, Jones took a plea deal for the murders of Janai Douglas, Kaliqua Gilliam, and Roxanne Coley. Jones pleaded guilty in order to avoid the death penalty. His prior conviction would have been an aggravating factor, which was required in order to seek the death penalty.
In exchange for pleading guilty, Jones received 20 years on top of his life without parole sentence. So he's going to be in jail for the rest of his life.
For the rest of his life. I couldn't agree more with the jury's decision in this case.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just, listen, we'll get into it in our takes. Let's talk about where are they now? Well, just a reminder, all of the victims, Janai Douglas, Kaliqua Gilliam, Roxanne Coley, and Kendria White, were all survived by close family and friends. Janai Douglas's mother, Kim, was actually unhappy with the outcome of the case. She said, although Jones did plead guilty, she wanted him proven guilty. And there was DNA found at the crime scene of Janai's murder, but it was a mixed sample. And at that time, they did not have a way of separating the sample and testing it.
I think they do now, but I'm not 100%.
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
Jeez, I'm going to have to put away my DNA Halloween costume. But
at that time, they did not.
Sure.
Yeah. But Kaliqua Gilliam's grandmother, Elizabeth Reed, she did not want to see Jones put to death, so she was satisfied with the result.
Now, Jones is currently serving his time at Crossroad Correctional Center in Cameron, Missouri. That's it for the story. What do you think of this case, Beth? What are your thoughts, OG of true crime?
Well, this is another one like last week.
Yeah.
Where we didn't get to hear much about the perpetrator's early life.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's hard to say why he did what he did.
Yeah.
He was pretty brazen in his crimes.
Right.
Raping a teacher at school during the school day.
What?
Yeah.
Killing
a woman. When you're a student.
I mean, just things that are brazen is the right word. Is there a stronger word? Somebody, an English person, English teacher, tell us.
Yeah, killing a woman in the middle of the day
in front of
her children.
Yeah.
So it seems like he didn't have very much control over himself. I mean, obviously, I think a lot of serial killers don't, but some of them, they at least plan things out. I don't know if he even planned any of this out.
I don't think so either. And I hate the phrase propensity for violence. I saw that on the last case that we covered in some articles. I hate it because it just implies that a human isn't capable of self-control. But I feel like a case can be made for Daniel Oliver Jones that he had a propensity for violence.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I did a lot of research on the town of Kansas City and the racist history in the police department. And I was expecting there to be police fuckery all over this case.
Right.
Up, down, left, right, diagonal, etc. When I dove into it. And, Kansas City PD is a little bit different than other police departments in that it's not controlled by the city. It's controlled by the state of Missouri.
Oh, wow.
And
I didn't know that.
It has a long-ass history of racism and corruption.
Yeah, I bet.
But I was pleasantly surprised. They investigated the murders. They sent the DNA that was available out for testing and got the right guy and solved the cases. Also, Daniel Oliver, we don't know, but he just seems so angry. Like the stabbings that did occur there were so many.
Over the top. Yeah.
Over the top. Like
overkill.
Yes. He must have been extremely angry at something.
Yeah.
And maybe it was his circumstances. Maybe he was poor. I don't know. Maybe it was the frustration.
Yeah, we don't even know what he was doing for a living.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe it was being Black in America in a really racist community or town. I'm not sure. But the fact that he committed such violent crime beginning at a young age is terrifying.
Yeah.
And again, no remorse. Like he kept changing his story.
Right.
Only because he didn't want to get in trouble. Not like, I care about this person. So much so that he went to the mom and was like, oh, how are you doing? Like that is beyond
That's so gross.
Fucked up.
Very fucked up. Yeah.
And so I just feel like he hated women and I feel like he had no regard for human beings, period. That's my thought on this guy.
I agree. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. And again, rest in power to the victims, to those queens, and just healing energy to their surviving family members, friends, and community.
Yeah.
Beth, where can the people find us?
Our website is fruitloopspod.com, and we use Fruit Loops Pod for all of our social media.
This is a weekly podcast, and new episodes drop every Thursday. So until next time, look alive, y'all. It's crazy out there.
So when the scammer uses the hypnotic method of building rapport, then they create dysfunctional, delusional reality.
That's how a scam begins, convincing the mark that it makes perfect sense to hand over their money to a con artist. The Scams and Cons podcast tells you how scams are run. You'll hear how people are convinced to buy fake art, buy machines that print money, or steal your house.
I get a phone call from my wife, and she let me know that they had decided to move all our stuff out. I could no longer do anything about it except go through an eviction.
And you'll hear it from the experts, people who run the cons.
So we go to your bank, you go in and get $6,000 cash, give us each $3,000, we give you this. You go home, and what you find out is cut up newspaper.
It's fun to know how the trick is done, and that's what Scams and Cons is all about. Listen at scamsandcons.com or wherever fine podcasts are found.
Ohio is a land of mystery, from missing shipwrecks and lost treasure beneath her surface to strange phenomenon slicing through her skies. From myths that have evolved around historic events and people to the unsolved murders and disappearances that keep her communities wondering what happened. Find Ohio Mysteries on your favorite podcast app, and let's explore the inexplicable. OhioMysteries.com.